All right, viewers, thank you so much for checking in with me and Dr. David Merrill. I'm going to call him David.
Welcome to Getting Literal with the Bible, your premier source for biblically proportioned Bible interviews.
As you know, videos drop on Fridays. It's so good to have everyone. Don't forget, after these illustrious interviews, we do have devotions for you to partake in, so avail yourself of that. Today, we're going to talk to Dr. Merrill. He's going to tell us about a book that we've contrived and that we're going to talk about. Are we talking about numbers, or did you want to switch it up?
I love that. Well, let's just talk about whatever.
Whiz bang.
Well, Marty, it's a gift to be here this Friday afternoon. I don't know when this thing drops, but it's in California time. It's Friday, and it's good to be here.
Good.
It's good to be with you. And I, one of my favorite kind of stories and one of the central stories of the Old Testament is the wilderness wandering. So this is what kind of drew me to want to talk about Numbers today. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. This has to be one of the worst named books in the English canon that I'm aware of. So yeah. So
I don't know,
yeah.
Lamentations, would that be harder? Like an entire book, like lamenting. It's very descriptive.
It's descriptive, yes.
It's very descriptive. And then you have the epistles that are just simply, hey, what's the city this is going to? It's Galatia. Okay, well, Galatians.
Right.
But yes, Numbers is rough.
Numbers is rough,
yeah. Yeah.
It's a big turnoff when you're first starting this walk, I think, through the Bible. It's a rumor that a lot of my interviewees take the Nazirite vow of number 6 after doing this interview. So to purify themselves of this wonderful experience, So I expect no less.
No razors kind of from here on out. I like that.
No razors, no wine, no dead bodies. So
unless you break the vow, then you shave everything and then you restart. Yeah. So
that's right. And then you have to redo the interview. No. Yeah. That would be special torture and apocryphal. David, what would you say is the primary theme of this book?
Yeah, I mean, as I'm reading Numbers, clearly there's lots of numbers. It's kind of flanked. It's a census that kind of flanks the wilderness wandering. So you have the census at the beginning of Numbers, the census again in chapter 26, as they're kind of preparing to kind of enter the land. But as far as themes, there's kind of a collection of themes. But maybe I'll just go with the probably the safest theme, which is God's faithfulness.
Wow.
How is that for an answer?
Yes, I think it's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, because you have this moment in Numbers where Balaam is this kind of prophetic voice in the region that he has been given money to curse Israel. And Yahweh does not enable Balaam to do so. Yahweh uses Balaam's donkey. We'll call him a donkey in this interview. Balaam, and as he's kind of prophesying an oracle over the people of Israel, God doesn't allow him to speak cursing over Israel. There's this interesting kind of moment where Yahweh kind of steps in. I'm like, no, I'm not going to allow that. So you see divine faithfulness in the face of lack of faith. Like you see rebellion, and yet you see the steadiness of God's faithfulness. Now there are moments when Moses has to kind of stand in the gap on behalf of Israel. Moses kind of pushes back, and there's kind of Old Testament scholars that wonder what's going on with Moses kind of negotiating with God, what's kind of happening there. But clearly we see really in the Pentateuch, we see divine faithfulness kind of playing out in the story. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I think that's so appropriate. How does this faithfulness of God, how does it connect with you?
Yeah.
In what ways?
Yeah. So I'll just say it in this way. From an early child, I grew up in the church. The story of the Exodus Mount Sinai, the wilderness wanderings, Joshua, and then the kind of taking over of the process of taking the land. Really, I would say has kind of captivated my imagination.
Mm.
And this whole kind of narrative is kind of a central core narrative of the Jewish people. They're looking back at the Exodus. They're looking back at the wilderness wanderings, and this is and then they're kind of, as Numbers is kind of pointing forward to Joshua. We see Jericho, this kind of explosive work of God, and then the slow playing out of God's story. And as I think of this story, I think when we see the Israelites in Exodus, they cry out to God because they're enslaved by Egypt.
Mm.
And it's clear who the enemy is. It's Pharaoh. Pharaoh's the enemy. God hears their cry. God raises up Moses. And the whole story of Moses, we could talk about Moses in a moment too, because he's a fascinating, just a fascinating character. So God sends Moses after he has been herding sheep in the wilderness for how many years? 40 years in the wilderness. Wow. He's kind of being prepared in the wilderness to herd sheep in the wilderness that are ornery and stiff-necked and rebellious. So Israel in Egypt thinks that fundamentally it's Pharaoh that's the problem. Mm. And God actually affirms that. Yes, Pharaoh is the problem. And I'm going to set my people free. So God does these kind of 10 miraculous movements. And then the 10th, of course, is the taking of the firstborn son of all of Egypt and Pharaoh's own son. And Israel, the angel passes over. So there's protection there. They pass through the Red Sea. And then there's exuberant kind of praise and worship of Yahweh, right? God's been faithful. He has rescued us from slavery, the enemy. So now the enemy has been kind of vanquished.
Right.
Then God brings them into the wilderness. And we hear this in Deuteronomy 8. Moses, as he's preaching the sermon, he says, okay, we're kind of at the cusp of the promised land. And let me tell you what just happened. And let me give you a renewed expression of the law and a charge now as you go. Because Moses doesn't get to go in because he hits the rock instead of speaking to the rock.
Yeah.
But what becomes clear as Israel is navigating now the wilderness is that they thought Pharaoh was the problem. They thought, and Pharaoh was the problem. And I think there's this really interesting, thing that plays out with the nation of Israel that I think maps on to how I think about spiritual formation in a lot of ways. That they needed rescue. They needed to be kind of brought out of bondage. They needed to be, to use biblical language, they needed to be redeemed. Yes. We needed to redeem you out of this slavery. Then God starts to reveal their hearts to themselves. This is what Moses says in Romans 8. Or Romans 8. In Romans 8 too.
Because of the transfiguration.
Yeah. So we think that Jesus is meditating on Deuteronomy 8 when he's being tempted by the devil in the wilderness. But another 40-day moment. So there where Israel's unfaithful, Jesus is faithful. There's so many, it's just beautiful how the scripture is stitched together. Like you see these stories kind of playing out, and then Jesus is recapitulating the story in his own life. Israel's unfaithful, Jesus is faithful. Okay, so let me get back to the point here. So when they go into the wilderness, God reveals their hearts to themselves. And they start to see what's in their heart. They start to see that there's idolatry that has been embedded in their heart. They become idolatrous. So now there's Baal, now they kind of come into contact with Baal or Baal. Now they're grumbling at God. Now they lack courage. Now there's what's kind of happening is God says, you thought Pharaoh was the problem, and he was. But now I need to show you what's in your own heart that is also the problem. I need you to reveal the rebellion in your heart.
Monumental.
And even that word testing is interesting. Because Israel puts God to the test many times in the book of Numbers. Will you provide us manna? Will you provide us meat. And I just was looking through this again. I love it. They want meat. They're asking for meat, and God says, "I'll give you meat." And the English, at least the ESV says, and there's going to be meat coming out of your noses.
Out of your nose, yeah.
Like you're gonna have piles of meat. Like it's going to be so much that you're gonna get tired of it. You want blessing with meat? Here you go. So there's these little Easter egg, just hilarious moments in Numbers as well.
Yeah.
So you find now Israel wandering in the wilderness, and now their hearts are being shown to themselves. They're realize, there's a problem within as well. It's not just this external problem. The problem is here as well. Yeah. So this just maps on so well with how Paul is going to talk about the flesh, the spirit in the New Testament. As we talked about the kind of the already not yet, as we see kind of playing out in the New Testament. You're saved, but you're being saved, and you will be saved, as the Puritans used to say. So this wilderness wandering story as a location of your heart being revealed it's been something I've probably just been chewing on for kind of most of my life.
Wow.
And in my work, kind of doing spiritual formation, it just totally maps on so clearly to me, out of those different elements of God bringing out kind of salvation, redemption, and then playing that out in our own kind of life of growth, the progressive element of sanctification.
So as you've chewed that meat, so to speak, what does that taste
out of my
like?
nose? It's coming out of my nose.
Coming out of your nose. Yeah.
That story is not Pollyannish. Well, I'll tell you what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Is that Yahweh isn't simply a kind of divine grandfather in the sky that wants us to have a good time. Right. God is very interested in the types of people we are going to become.
So true.
And wilderness is just a theme that plays out in the Christian life. And we can think of this in different kinds of ways. But what wilderness does is it reveals our hearts to ourselves. It reveals our hearts to God, and really it's a kind of testing that's like, that's in my heart. There's rebellion in my heart. There's idolatry in my heart. There's lack of faith in my heart. Yeah.
Wow. So true.
Continue your scriptural journey and tune in next time for part 2. Viewers, thank you so much for stopping by and getting literal with the Bible. Don't forget, Stairway Division is a not-for-profit. It is our vision to promote a wise and compassionate paradigm for sharing Jesus Christ with others. This is the reason we do everything that we do. If you would like to help in this project, stop by www.stairwaydivision.org/partners. Any help from you would be much appreciated. Don't forget that our videos drop every Friday, and if you know anybody that this particular video would resonate with, feel free to share it with them. Also, please remember to pray for the success of the channel. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.